welcome to this special broadcast that we are bringing to you in collaboration with Voice of America. My name is Mohammed Saleh. And on the show today, we'll be taking a look at the concerns about the recent bank failures and also the bailouts that have sent ripples through the global financial markets. From New York to Beijing, central bankers are in fact working overtime to try and calm the nerves of the investors and the depositors. The Voice of America's Mike O'Sullivan, who's been tracking this story very closely from California, where a major player in the tech industry, the Silicon Valley Bank, collapsed earlier this month, has sent us this report. Take a look.
The steps we took.
The banking system is sound, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen assured bankers Tuesday. Yellen and other officials' reassurances come amid the plummeting stock price of San Francisco-based First Republic Bank and the failure of Signature Bank, a player in cryptocurrency markets. As the Biden administration protected depositors at Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank, a major funder of tech startups that also failed this month, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde attempted to calm nerves in Brussels after Swiss officials announced a deal on Sunday for UBS Bank to buy struggling Credit Suisse, a global investment bank and financial services company.
And we are very confident that the capital and liquidity positions of the euro area bank are very satisfactory.
Asian investors were worried, including in Shanghai, as Chinese officials insisted a joint venture with Silicon Valley Bank is stable. U.S. Senator Marco Rubio has urged a review of the bank's Chinese holdings to ensure that U.S. firms that work in critical technology are not acquired by Chinese interests. The U.S. government acted to avoid what economists call contagion, says Diane Ellis, a former U.S. regulator who is now with the financial services company IntraFi. She spoke with VOA on Zoom.
And that can happen when a bank fails and its failure causes, say, another bank to fail or another financial institution or other businesses so large that it creates significant damage to the real economy.
All of these efforts are an attempt to avoid a repeat of the 2008 U.S. housing market crash that led to hundreds of bank failures and plunged the world into recession. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
And also to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening in the banking system in America, we're being joined by Jessica Stone, and she's joining us live from the White House in Washington, D.C. Now, Jessica, we've heard from both the Fed Chair Jerome Powell and also the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen this week. Now, what did we learn about the health of the U.S. banking system, and what does it in fact mean, the rate hike mean for the American consumers?
Well, the Federal Reserve is warning of what they call tightening financial conditions. And what that basically means is that it is going to be tougher for Americans to get lending, and that will affect the housing market. Of course, that's going to affect credit card interest rates. It's going to be more expensive to carry debt on a credit card. It will also impact home equity loan rates, things of that nature, all because the Federal Reserve at this point has just raised the interest rate for prime lending by 0.25%. And they've also indicated that they are probably going to raise just one more time this year and likely keep it at level but not cut, which is something the market, of course, is looking for. This past decade of easy money has been very good for Wall Street and in particular technology companies. Powell's goal, the Federal Reserve chief, his goal is to keep inflation, get it back really to 2%. And that is a chief aim of the Federal Reserve Bank. It's one of its mandates. He says that the banking crisis is not a systemic flaw, but there's also reason to believe that this banking crisis could also help slow the economy, and that could also affect the pace with which the Federal Reserve raises rates. So he is saying that he is watching to see if the banking crisis does impact the economy, but with essentially no plan over the long term communicated, we are certainly going to expect to see that markets remain uncertain and a little bit volatile. Saleh?
Absolutely, indeed. Now, also another issue that has dominated the headlines in the United States of America this week is, of course, the access to the Chinese-owned app TikTok The CEO of TikTok in the United States testified at the Capitol Hill on Thursday. What did we learn about the company's efforts to address the serious security concerns that have been raised by the American legislators?
Well, first of all, it was an incredibly long and drawn-out hearing, must-see TV for anybody in Washington covering these issues. It was more than 5 hours long of testimony and Q&A with the TikTok CEO, Mr. Chu. He talked at length about Project Texas, which is TikTok's answer to those national security concerns expressed by many in the U.S. government. It is a plan to move all U.S. user data into the United States on Oracle's servers, which is an American company, and it will be administrated and accessed only through a U.S.-based board of people who have a security background. And that whole project is intended to be completed somewhere by the end of 2023. But Shiji Chu also testified that at this point, those protections are not in place, essentially that Chinese engineers and Chinese employees can have access to American user data. And it was very lively, a lot of harsh words from lawmakers. And one exchange in particular caught my eye, and this was when a lawmaker literally showed death threats against the chair of the committee that were on TikTok, left on TikTok for more than 40 days to the CEO. Only later did we learn, just about maybe 30 minutes later, did we learn that TikTok had then removed that death threat. But you can see that this is a very lively conversation, a very consequential conversation, not only, of course, for American lawmakers, but, of course, for the future of TikTok, because they have the threat of being banned from operating in the United States, which impacts 150 million American users, many of them very young, and if they do not divest themselves and basically sell off the TikTok part of the brand. Chu was also asked during the hearing whether or not he agreed with that plan. He didn't. He said he didn't think that that was necessary. He also was asked about differences between the Chinese version of the app and the American version concerning censorship. As I said, a very fascinating look into the inner workings of TikTok, one of the most controversial apps in the American landscape right now.
Absolutely, indeed. 150 million people in the United States, in fact, use this app. It will be very interesting to see as to where that goes. Jessica, do continue to stay on with this, because I want you to weigh in on another key issue that has been dominating the headlines in the United States, where the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said that governments must do much more to move away from fossil fuels. The Biden administration has taken several steps, but a recent decision to approve an oil drilling project in Alaska has disappointed those who wanted the United States to, in fact, swiftly cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. The Voice of America's Veronica Balderas-Iglesias gets you more.
After a failed attempt during the Trump administration, crude oil producer ConocoPhillips now has a green light from the Biden administration to build and operate a scaled-back version of its Willow oil drilling project in Alaska. Environmentalists are fighting back.
We're suing the federal government because it has a responsibility under our National Environmental Policy Act to analyze alternatives to mitigate environmental harm. ConocoPhillips will still be able to develop 92% of the oil that they contemplated in their original proposal.
Air quality, water quality, how the project would impact animals. A number of people in the community have real concerns about climate change.
But Alaskan peoples on the North Slope are not a monolith. Nagarek Harcharek, president of the Voice of the Arctic in Nupiat, lobbied in favor of the Willow project.
There's going to be 2,500 construction jobs on the site itself. The research into our subsistence resources, so the whales and the terrestrial animals that we have, and all of that is funded through the taxes generated from the resource development.
ConocoPhillips and several U.S. agencies declined to be interviewed, but White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre defended the administration's decision.
Some of the company's leases are decades old, granted by prior administrations. The company has a legal right to those leases.
After the Department of the Interior green-lighted the Willow project, President Joe Biden announced new actions to conserve and restore federal lands and water habitats across the nation. While he did not keep his promise to reject new drilling on public lands, Biden's environmental record is strong, said Tiernan Sittenfeld with the League of Conservation Voters.
The Inflation Reduction Act is the single biggest investment our country has ever made. It's $369 billion in climate solutions, in clean energy, in environmental justice.
The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change urged again this week that nations phase out fossil fuels. A quick shift by the US is unlikely, according to political scientist Stefan Schmidt.
It's not so easy to be environmental when you have, so few options of substituting the existing energy means of transportation and production of electricity, which relies on hydrocarbons largely.
Congressional pushback adds to the challenges. House Republicans are expected to vote on a bill next week that would, among other things, end a federal moratorium on the leasing of federal land for coal mining. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
And also Jessica Stone from Voice of America is still with us. Now, Jessica, a part of the world is, of course, suffering from the impact of climate change in the Pacific Islands region, where the rising sea levels are a key indicator. And this week, President Joe Biden, in fact, called for a new marine sanctuary in the Pacific. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, the designation is a request by the Biden administration to protect additional lands and waters around what they call the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument, which was established during the Bush administration. The Biden administration says it is part of its commitment to conserve at least 30% of lands and waters by 2030. These are U.S. waters. This area stretches from Hawaii to Wake Island to the island of Kiribati. And I spoke to the Kiribati ambassador who works out of the United Nations mission, and he said, quote, "This helps Kiribati efforts to conserve coastal fisheries, a primary food source for Pacific peoples." But I got to tell you, not everyone feels that way. Congresswoman Amada from American Samoa, she has condemned this announcement, saying there was no consultation with the fishing industry, with which many people make their living, especially on the island of American Samoa. She's very concerned about the canneries in her district. So I think there will be some more debate about this. And there is room for that because the process is a proposal by the administration. It then has to go through public review and a sign-off by local governments as well. Mohammed?
Absolutely, indeed. Now, what is interesting, Jessica, is the fact that Washington is also investing billions of dollars in terms of diplomacy and security in the Indo-Pacific. Now, the Compact of Free Association is central to that effort. And one of its negotiators is, in fact, testified at the Capitol Hill this week. Now, what have we learned about the status of these negotiations so far?
Well, just to back up for a quick second and explain what the compact is, it is a 20-year agreement between the U.S. government and the governments of 3 island nations. They include Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Royal Marshall Islands. And they've been under this agreement. It will expire on October 1st of this year. So they have been negotiating, beginning in the Trump administration, now in the Biden administration, how to extend this compact and take into account additional concerns expressed by the Pacific Islands. At this point, they say they will have those talks settled by May in order to establish implementing legislation that has to be passed by Congress. Most of this has been a conversation about economic support by the U.S. government, which the islands give the U.S. government in exchange for allowing the U.S. to what's called strategically deny third-party countries access to those islands. So that is definitely an effort aimed at keeping the PRC out of those waters and out of relying on those 3 island nations. They are working on the economic, or they've already actually signed off on the economic levels of support. In fact, the compact is expected to cost about $7 billion over the next 20 years. That's the number that's been asked for by the U.S. government, and much of that is going to economic assistance. Some also accommodations are being made for the nuclear legacy in that part of the world because, of course, the nuclear weapons test by the United States occurred in the Royal Marshall Islands. There are concerns about environmental and health impacts. Those are part of the conversation. And again, they're expected to wrap up in May, but Congress has to pass the funding to support this compact by October 1st in order for it to go forward. Otherwise, it has to start all over again with these negotiations. So that's what we learned from a hearing on Thursday here in the United States on Capitol Hill. Mohammed?
Absolutely. Very interesting there. Thank you very much indeed, Jessica Stone, for joining us from Washington, D.C. and getting us all those insights there.